Hello everybody, Joe Bag of Donuts here. Welcome back for another episode of Mihoyo. Sorry about the little delay there between episodes. I proceeded to die of food poisoning from bad Chipotle, so I was down and out for like an entire day, and then the next day, I still had work, 12-hour shift, just going through it like a zombie. Came home, no shot. And then yesterday was Umineko Day, so that got recorded. Now it's the next day, and I'm recording this, which hopefully, I'll be able to get up in time because it's almost 4 a.m. right now because I was a little sleepyhead and slept in till it was almost 1 in the morning. So, woke up, had some breakfast, and made 2 pots of coffee in like the 3 hours I've been awake. So I'm ready to go. I kind of had my caffeine high and now it's more plateauing out. So, feeling good. So, Hopefully my brain just doesn't fail me like it did right there. Oh, off to a great start, aren't we? Anyway, what happened last time? Fucking Aoko got turned into hamburger meat. That wasn't good. But, she pulled through. And I guess we're gonna go pay Toko a house visit, maybe, once she's up and moving. Let's begin. By evening, only Sojiro remained in the chapel. He sat alone at the end of a pew, slouching helplessly like a guilty believer ready to confess. The chilly air seeped through the walls, turning breath to mist. The frigid air stole the heat from the body without mercy. Sojiro looked around at the chapel's tall ceiling and spacious hall. The room made the air feel colder somehow. Well, yeah, it's because all the hot air rises to the ceiling, so you're just left with the cold air sitting at the bottom, which would be a lot because these ceilings are really tall. That's how thermodynamics work. Unsure of what to do with himself, he stared into space. His thoughts were entirely unfocused. First and foremost, he could not understand what the buzzing sensation was in his chest. Ooh, I get that sometimes. Like, I'll just have, like, a little muscle spasm. Not my heart, like my chest muscle itself, my pectoral will just kind of go... I've actually had it, like, spasm so hard that it was, like, making an audible buzzing noise, and like you could feel it. It was weird. I should probably have more salt in my diet or something, get my electrolytes. Time passed by, no answers came. To onlookers, he must seem deep in thought or in a deep sleep, like he would turn to stone if left be. Either way, he clearly looked down. The problem was his lack of awareness, not that he was aware of it, of course.
Oh yeah.
Nah, I'm pretty sure my man doesn't even know what the Bible is. Speaking of the Bible, another reason why I was late on recording this, I just spent like an hour having a theology discussion on Discord. Not that I'm religious, just talking about it from like, almost like anthropological, sociological viewpoint. And like, different denominations and whatnot. Fun stuff. Christianity is super interesting because there's so many branches and everyone's always fighting. Sojiro raised his head and turned to where the voice came from. Stood before the altar was the man from last night, dressed in priestly garbs. How long had he been standing there? Sounds great start. Sounds reverberated dryly throughout the chapel hall. Sojiro did not have the strength to stand, let alone leave. He just stared at the approaching shadow. Odd thing for a priest to say. You a fake priest too? The priest pointed at Sojiro's pew. Without waiting for an answer, he took a seat at the opposite end. That's a weird name. Fumidsuka? I've never really seen the deed lead into a Su like that. Huh. I mean, I guess you can do it. But then again, this game's weirdly translated names in the past, so take that with a grain of salt. Yep, good egg. Father Aries spoke in a gentle but uninterested tone. Uninvested? Uninvested. He was a thorough egotist. Sojiro knew all too well about people who spoke this way. The individual who cared for him when he first came down from the mountain was one of them. Sojiro glanced across at him apathetically. Father Eri seemed unfazed by the lack of direction to the conversation. Sure, give us some spiritual guidance. Sojiro responded with a nod. Father Eri replied with an artificial smile. Sojiro stared straight ahead as he answered. His voice sounded uncharacteristically weak and unsure. Yeah, it's teenager things. So I didn't check to see that my audio levels were balanced. Okay, they are. Okay. What, like how brazenly she lives? What do you mean? With those few words, Sojiro snapped out of his funk. He clapped his hands and turned towards the priest. Yeah, have you seen her? Who would want to be like that? Father Eri did not respond to his confession-like ramblings. Yeah, have you ever heard about the good word? Is that what Christians say? No, the Bible's the good book. But is it the good word? I don't know. I'm sure. Father Eri looked at Sojiro placidly. His pupils were like the black holes that could suck the soul out of your body. Yeah, don't be making, like, biblical alliteration to Sojiro. He's just gonna go way over his head. That's a question I've also posed. Sojiro was not sure what he had done, but it sounded as though the priest was accusing him of something. Then again, it was a reasonable question, if a little pointless. Sojiro had no answer. Father Eri ignored the sullen boy and continued. Well, sometimes simple is best. Sojiro still did not answer. His expression remained blank. The only sound was the priest's voice echoing around the chapel. Father Eri repeated his question. Sojiro's mouth remained firmly shut. Not because he did not want to answer, but because he simply did not know how to. All he knew was even if he wanted to go back, he could not.
故郷を捨てた理由もわからないのに旅先の土地を愛せることなんてまっとうな人間にはできませんよ。これは忠告ですが、全てを無条件に肯定したところで幸福になれるとは限りません。
Okay, fair.
あなたはもう少し自分の心を許してあげないと。
Sojiro could not make sense of what he was being told. Only the father's last words made any impression on him. Being fair to yourself is easier said than done, of course. And what that entailed, Sojiro was uncertain of.
そういえば
Toko had mentioned something similar before, and it had impressed him. First her, now this priest. How could people know things that he hadn't even known, that he hadn't even told them?
すごいですね。
I mean,
神父さんっていう
you're
のは
really
みんな
unguarded.
そ
You're
う
like
な
an
んです
open
か？
book. Sojiro said, curious as to where the weight on his shoulders had gone to. In a way, one of his strong points is that his emotional scars do not show on the surface.
ええ、神父は悩みを暴くのが仕事ですから。ま、大抵は暴くだけで埋めるのに失敗するんですけどね。
悩みを暴くって、つまり相談事ですか？
If that helps you, find out what your issue is, then sure.
そういうソフトなのも受けたまわっています。私が解決できる悩みなどたかが知れているようですけど。
The priest shrugged, looking a little disconcerted. Granted, Sojiro still did not trust Father Eri at all, but at the moment, anyone was a ray of light in his eyes.
じゃあ、たかが知れた程度の悩みを聞いてもらえますか？
君が青子をなぜ羨むかですね。
It was as though the priest could see into the boy's soul with his serene eyes.
まあ、そういうことです。自分でもどうしてそう思うのかがわからない。でもあなたならそれを知ってそうだ。
知りませんけど、まあ、無責任に答えましょうか。
ね。
それはおそらく、あなたには根拠がないからですよ。
What do you mean?
自分の色がないと例えた方が正確です
Okay,
が。
that's fair. Yeah, Sojiro doesn't really have much of an identity to him. Sojiro squinted, trying to understand the priest's complicated yet concise answer.
ほら、そこです。君に優れた部分があるとしたら、その順応性です。
He hasn't watched enough movies when he was a kid to just completely download his personality from an interesting character he saw when he was 7.
山という異界から町に降りて一人で暮らしていけたこと、ようやく慣れた常識の中で青子たちという非常識と関わっても暮らしていけたこと、そうであると努めているにしてもあなたの順応性は際立っている。原因は知りませんが、君には初めから自我というものが第一に現れてはいないのです。
Yeah, he's pretty mellow and just goes with the flow.
何事にも対応できるものの種に交わるほど器用でもない。強いて言うのなら色の乗っていない空白ですかね。風景に溶け込む自然さは素晴らしい人徳ですが、自我がないということは居場所がないということですから、いいことばかりじゃありません。ユイカにまで見えないというのは予想以上でしたが、姿なき精霊すら捉えるあれが見えなかったのですから、君の無欲ぶりも筋金入りだ。
As if amused by something, Father Eri grinned. However, Sojiro understood neither the meaning of his smile nor his words.
憶測に過ぎませんが、青子はあなたを見て反感を覚えたと思いますよ。自分のないあなたは自己を押し通してきた彼女にとって認めがたいものだったで
He used
し
to
ょうから。
fucking whip you into shape until you come into your own.
そして同時にあなたは青子に自分ではどうしても手に入れられないものを見てしまった。言葉にするとくだらない表現になりますが、そういうことです。先ほどは嫉妬と言いましたが、それは訂正しましょう。君は青子に、いや、いいです。 言葉にするのはそれこそ野暮だ。
Sure, whatever you say, man. Or in this case, I guess whatever you don't say. Father Aries smiled gently. It was a fresh-faced grin that belied his age. Whenever it came to Aoko, he seemed to forget his role as a priest. But that was irrelevant to Sojiro.
神父さん、それで結局自分は青子のどこら辺に憧れてるんですか？
No, no, how's he supposed to know that? Sojiro responded to Father Aries' ramblings by being direct. Some would say that the priest had been direct himself, but this was Sojiro, and he needed things spelled out.
今のでもわからないと。
Nah, not the sharpest tool in the shed.
参りましたね。こういうことは言葉
But,
を
you know,
尽くすほど
sometimes you don't need to
時
be.
間が湧かないものですが。
You know, a hammer doesn't need to be sharp to get the job done.
私も神父と呼ばれる身です。少し切り口を変えて代弁してみましょう。あなたは青子の過去を知っていますか？
Nope.
詳しくは知りません。高校デビューとかおかしな言葉を口にしてましたけど。
I mean, yeah, she brought up like the family inheritance dispute, but really, that's it.
全く知らないということですね。いいでしょう。ではしずきくん、虐待のない例え話ですが、君は突然自殺しろと言われて従えますか？
I mean, probably not. I mean, people tell me that online all the time, so.
自殺ですか？
そう、自殺です。神父である私が口にしていいことではありませんが、まあ、私は格好だけなのでいいでしょう。青子はね、近いことを求められたのです。15歳の時。
Become a mage.
彼女がそれまで積み重ねてきた努力も希望も、過去も未来も全て捨てること。今日からお前は違う生き物として生きろ。どうです？それは自己の抹消。未来の人と同じだと思います。
Life is no longer purely your own. His words fit what Aoko had said about her past. Until middle school, she had led a normal life. Then out of the blue, she became the family heiress in place of her sister. Becoming a magician meant casting aside the life she had known. She had to leave behind her ambitions and prospects, and live the life of a mage, something she barely knew anything about. Her life up to that point had taught her that everything from then on would bring her misery. Ako's grandfather was not the forceful type. Your sister had failed, now it's your turn, he had said. Did Aoko resist? Sojiro could not begin to imagine. All he knew is that she could not be happy with the hand she was dealt. Even if the life of a magician was attractive, to believe the possibility that Aoko could give up her lifestyle up to that point was to not know her at all. Aoko Ozaki put her all into everything. She had probably achieved a lot in those 15 years. Her achievements and prospects were no doubt enough to make anyone jealous. But she did have the conviction to throw those away and go back to square one. You missed a word there, guys. And square one did not come close to the reality of it. The future she had envisioned for so long would have been obliterated.
青子はどうしたんですか？
いや、これがもう全くの頑固者でして。
Well, she's essentially juggling both.
立ち会った私でさえどうかと思うぐらい簡単にうなずきました。震える指を懸命に握り込んで、やってやろうじゃないと見栄を切ってね。彼女は祖父の期待や青崎の責任感からではなく、逃げることを嫌って魔術師の道を取ったんですよ。
Yeah, a little bit of a stubborn streak.
拒むことは逃げではないのでしょうが、青子にはそう思えたんでしょう。逃避という行為はこれまでの自分の時間を否定することになると。今までの自分を嘘にしてしまうのなら、今までの生活に別れを告げることを青子は選んだのです。まあ極端ではありますが。 あれは前に進むためなら全てを捨てられる人間なんです。
An affectionate smile crossed Father Aries' face. Rather than signaling his closeness to Aoko, he conveyed the pride of a guardian.
ですが、私も思い違いをしていました。結局はそうなるように、青子は育てられていたのです。彼女の祖父は、瞳子が家を出ることも、青子が跡継ぎを了解することも読んだ上で、
Okay, he didn't put all the fucking eggs in one basket.
形だけですが、私も神父としてさすがにそれはどうかと思いましてね。祖父の思い通りになることはありません。なんなら私とメキシコあたりに逃げませんかと。しかしまあ、
Ay, caramba.
躊躇なく振られました。
Yeah, don't flee with strange men to Mexico.
その時の彼女の返答は今でも一言一句覚えています。
だって私一人がどんなに泣き叫んでも今の状況は変わらないんでしょ。私にしかできないなら正面から受けて立つ。
How to cope. Step 1. Gaslight yourself.
たとえ不本意で突然投げ込まれた川の中でだってできることはあるはずだもの。
Just tell yourself that all these challenges are, a test from the universe to make yourself stronger.
逃げるなんてのは最後の最後。それまではせいぜい華麗に踊ってやるわ。
The priest recited her words as if recalling lines from a favorite play. Certainly seemed like something she would say. Last thing Aoko said in the room she was recovering in probably meant the same. Of course, when an audience is watching, you want their approval. However, approval must come from within first. Aoko worked to feel proud of herself before worrying about how others viewed her. She at least wanted to do her job with grace. In response to everything she had lost, she would hang in there, even if it meant going it alone. As for why Sojiro envied her, well, that was obvious. Sojiro, she lived her life with her head held high. He was a boy who accepted everything, but had nothing. She was a girl who threw it all away, but never lost a thing. He stood in the meeting room alone, seeing the ugliness within, and the sublime outside. Looking back, finally realized what was eating at him.
もういいでしょう。君は青子の容姿に感じ入ったのではなく、青崎青子という生き方に感じ入ったのです。ま、青子は青子で、れっきとした美人ですが。
Sojiro nodded. From the day he first met her, that was indeed how he had felt. It just took him till now to realize it. The strength in her eyes and her unwavering will had captured his heart.
なんかすごい汗我慢だ。
Yep.
本当に小娘のくせにギネス級の頑固さです。
Father Aries spoke from the heart. Sojiro raised his head, gave a small grin, and scratched his cheek. So many hours wasted brooding like an idiot. Part of him still felt strange, but it didn't bother him to leave the question unsolved for now. Unable to stay still, he stood up. Couldn't care less about the Aozaki family, mage battles, or Aoko rushing off to her death. Right now, he just wanted to see her face.
お待ちなさい。病室は立ち入り禁止です。
Oh, hush. The cold words echoed around the chapel. They reached Sojiro as he was about to head back to Aoko. The sightless sister must have been waiting by the altar. She moved quickly to block his path.
ゆいかさん、今病室には入れないんですか？
はい。しばらく人よけをしてほしいとクオンジ様からことづかっています。
アリスが。
Sojiro was suspicious of why Alice would have said that. Could understand being kept out if Aoko was being treated or her condition had worsened, but this seemed different. Besides, Aoko herself said her treatment had finished.
人がいいのですね、シスターユイカは。
What,
そんな
fucking
方便を
Aoko
しなくても
crawling out the
いいんで
window or
すよ。
something right now?
はっきり言ってあげればいい。
Yeah,
今から病室に行っても無駄ですと青子はとっく
Saw that
に
one
出
coming a
発
mile
している
away.
んですから。
エイリ神父。
The priest began to explain everything from the pew he still sat in, about the things he and Sojiro had spoken about, and why he, a stranger, would be so concerned about a person he knew nothing about. It all became clear to Sojiro.
初めからそのつもりだったんですね。
Sojiro's voice was full of anger, but Father Eri did not flinch.
申し訳ありません。青子にあなたの本を
Yeah, keep
頼
him
まれ
busy.
たもので。彼女の準備が整うまでの時間稼ぎでしたが、私があなたと話
Two
を
birds,
した
one
かったのは事実ですよ。
The priest's attempt to smooth things over was far from sincere. Sojiro grit his teeth to control his rage. Why had they not stopped Aoko and Alice from heading towards certain death? Because both the nun and priest were of the same ilk as the mages. As such, they understood Aoko's decision, and the priest understood Aoko too. Even if he did have the power to stop her, he would not have. The Aoko Ozaki he knew was not about to hide away in a church and lick her wounds.
アリスは
青子と行きましたよ。あれから30分は過ぎていますね。
Brother Eri even went so far as to divulge the time. 30 minutes ago. Same time the priest reared his head. It would not have taken them half that long to get to school from here. And another 10 minutes or less to get to Misaki High's old school building from there. Sojiro turned to the entrance of the chapel. However,
待ちなさい。どこへ行くつもりですか？
the sound of her voice stopped him in his tracks. An unseen pressure had him locked in place. Her admonishing seemed to carry a spellbinding power, stopping the foolhardy boy where he stood.
あなたは魔術師同士の争いを知りません。
Well, just as it's their decision to go fucking march off to their own deaths, it's his decision to go after them.
何の助力にもならないばかりか。彼女たちの足かせになるだけです。
Yeah, he still wants to go.
彼女たちが命を落とすのは彼女たちの業によるもの。望むままに傷つけ合えばいいでしょう。あなたのような何の咎もない若者が教示に立ち会うことはありません。
He's no longer a bystander in this. She spoke with a quiet anger. Her contempt was not directed at Aoko or Alice, though, but Sojiro for being so eager to waste his life.
何かしら希望があるのなら私も止めはしません。ですがこの件は別です。あなたが言っても彼女たちが助かることはありません。
She was right. It would be pointless for him to go. At the amusement park, he had been useless in the end. Now, they faced something even worse. Couldn't even imagine how he might contribute this time.
言っておきますが、青崎青子は祖父に護身術を教え込まれています。
Yeah, she can
魔
throw
術以
hands.
外でもあなたより腕は立つ。その彼女もあの使い魔が相手では勝負にならない。
Sojiro's physical strength, his only edge, meant nothing. If he went now, he would only get in their way. Yuiko was correct. And yet,
でも行かないと。青子には返さなくちゃいけない借りがあります。
he spoke calmly but firmly. Though almost moved, the sister frowned slightly. She felt bad for him, but her warning was for his own good. If he would not listen to reason, then she would have to make him sleep. She raised a finger of binding at
そ
Sojiro.
れを言うなら返したい借りがあるですよ。それとシスターユイカ、教会内での魔術は控えてくださいね。
Yeah, it seemed a little, uncouth.
使うのなら筆跡に留めてもらわないと私の査定に響きます。まったくおとなしそうに見えて律香君より短気なんですから、あなたは。
エイリ神父、
行かせてあげればいいじゃないですか。それともあなたはやはり青子たちに退場
Yeah,
してほしい。
throw an unknown element into the mix and see how that, that changes things.
その問題と彼の献身は別の話です。改めなさい、しずきさん。あなたが言っても何もできはしないのですから。
The truth of this statement cut Sojiro deep. But despite everything that was being said, his mind was made up. It always had been. Even if he was not certain, he at least would not hesitate. He had always followed his instincts to the end, no matter where they took him.
分かっています。でも行かないと。ここにいたら本当に何もできない。
His heart burned in his chest. While he listened to the priest talk, he could only think of seeing Aoko. He was not worried, did not want to help. He just wanted to see her. He would figure out what came next when he got there.
ほら、献身なんて考え自体が間違ってるんです。足を引っ張る
Yeah,
と
what
言い
kind
ま
of
すが
friend would he be if he wasn't there for them in this tough
勝ち
time?
目はないんでしょ。なら彼がマイナスになってもいいじゃないですか。どうせ破産するなら豪快に破産すれば。
神父。
Yeah, but that's just like more cleanup for the church to do afterwards.
ほら、宗十郎君、言って言って。シスター、今のあなたの返事で心が折れましたから。
Right?
足、動くでしょ。
As soon as the priest pointed at Sojiro, he could move again. Pressure weighing on his shoulders lifted, along with the fear in his heart. Could he help? Would he expose Aoko and Alice to more danger? All such doubts had vanished.
行きます。縁が残っていればまた。
はい。なんであれ、後悔のない一日を。
No regrets. And with that, Sojiro began to run. His father Eri watched with a look of satisfaction. The priest knew he could not persuade Aoko. He could not convince Sojiro either. He watched the impetuous boy run away. As the blind nun listened to his footsteps fade into the distance, Yuiko was different from Sojiro and the priest. While she showed no mercy to corruption or self-righteousness, she embraced benevolence to the innocent. Such an ordinary boy with his life ahead of him, and yet he chose to follow heretics into hell.
最悪ですね、エイリ神父。分別のつかない子供を導くのが責任のある大人だと思いました。
Well, they still need to live their own life. She made no effort to hide her biting disapproval. It was simply her way of showing concern for the boy. Father Eri shrugged.
だから、いろいろと間違えていますよ、シスターユイカ。責任のある大人なんて言葉自体がおかしい。
Yeah, it seems to be the case from the little we've known of this guy so far.
何が起きても責任を取る。それが正しい大人というものです。
What? Usually, oh, I'm gonna find some way to fucking dodge this shit. No, wait, it's coming back to me. The rest went unspoken. It didn't matter to him which of them died. With a warm, goodly smile, the priest corrected the nun's misunderstanding. Nothing in the archive, yeah? Nope. Which on the Holy Night to start. The golden wolf's ears stood pointed, twitching in response to the sounds around it. Its meal finished, curled up into a ball in anticipation of nap time, and yawned, half from boredom. The old, abandoned classroom had fulfilled its purpose many moons ago. For a month, the wolf had spent his time resting on top of a heap of disheveled desks. His name was... oh god, what's that, Lou? I'm just gonna go with Lou. Lou Beowulf. He was a purebred werewolf, named after the sun at his birthplace and a hero of legend upon leaving there. It goes without saying that he was not from this country. He came from a land deep within the European wilderness, surrounded by mountains and forests. His homeland was a realm no human had ever set foot in. In their isolated world forgotten by time, a diminishing race of werewolves lived in peace. This was where Bayo first appeared. In a cave on the outskirts of their village, the werewolves found a child bearing the same golden coat as their ancestors. The child was sleeping soundly, as if in his natural habitat. The village welcomed their new member with open arms. 2,000 years of advancing civilization had been cruel to them. As the forests were destroyed, valleys unearthed, and waters polluted, the werewolf birth rate dwindled. They were now facing one birth a decade. The child's golden coat, deviating from the typical gray or white and shared only by their ancestors who were treated as gods, felt like a sign their prayers had been answered. Bloodline and entropy. Entropy? Entropy. The werewolves were forced to embrace change. This radiant child, at least temporarily, made them forget about their troubles. Alas, as time passed, their hopes turned to disappointment. The golden wolf was not their salvation. For some reason, Lu, that ray of golden sun, remained a child. Decades passed, and still he did not grow. Forever young, immortal, cursed. He searched the village for his birth mother, but to no avail. He searched the village for someone who understood his plight, but to no avail. Over hundreds of years, he came to realize something. He was different. Very different. Neither male nor female. Neither strong nor weak. Ignorant of life and death, joy and fear. That thing's a spirit, born of nature. Might look like us werewolves, but don't let that fool you. My main's an elemental. But the child himself needed not conjecture to know his own true nature. He was perfect, and therefore he was alone. To the golden wolf, the world was too small. That was why. Indeed, that was the very reason. He wanted to know what life was. He wanted to know loss. If he was all-powerful, he wanted to know the mystery behind his all-powerfulness. Because if it was, his existence was meaningless. Because as it was. The golden wolf was at a loss, as were the werewolves around him. They revered him, but at the same time they wanted nothing to do with him. He was a bit of a white elephant. Lu moved back to the cave where he was discovered in, and resigned himself to a life of seclusion.
太陽のルー？ルーガルじゃなくて？そりゃ面白い。偶然にしちゃできすぎだ。
Also, ain't Lu, isn't that like Irish? And then one day, a quirky mage visited the island. I mean, the village. I'm thinking of Ireland, so I'm like, Ireland's an island.
またガタガタとうるさい。トウコさんはあれだよね。
From his place atop of the rubble, Bayo peered into the hallway. He thought his fussy master was busy dealing with Misaki City's ley lines, but she was engrossed in making traps. 1 month passed since the dilapidated building, One month passed since they made the dilapidated building their makeshift workshop. Creating a new trap for intruders became a daily pursuit of Toko's.
安全を用意しておくなんて他の生き物は大変だ。
Having been like this since birth, knowing neither infancy nor dotage, he thought differently than others. For he was perfect from the day he was born, never declining, never improving. As such, he had no comprehension of weakness. Childlike, fickle, and without morals, he had no concept of good and bad as either a human or a wolf. A beautiful creature disconnected from the world around him, he was on top of all other creatures. With one exception, his master, Toko Ozaki. She showed him a sparkling, delicious world. Delicious? Okay. And above all, he found her scent refreshing. To him, the world was divided into what was cool and what was not. Your preference in leisure pursuits were of no consequence to him, and he never took gender into account. The only thing that mattered to him was whether a person's life was logical and therefore cool. Toko Ozaki had her faults, but she smelled good.
ベオ、昼食は済ませたか？
Beo's master entered the classroom, presumably done with their traps for the day.
夜が本番だ。それまであまり羽目を外すなよ。
Sometimes, like now, she would nag him, but on the whole, his master pleased him. In reality, the contract binding him to her was not particularly powerful. If he wanted to, he could tear her to pieces at any time. No human could restrain him. However, he had no intention of killing Toko in exchange for his freedom. And there was a reason for this. In order to move about freely in human society, he needed someone like her. As long as she did not offend him, he had no reason to rock the boat. However,
やっと本番か。待たせすぎだよ、トウコさん。
the promise she made with him in his cave and the reality of their situation had begun to come apart at the seams.
最高の神秘と戦わせてやる。
He was complacent up till now, but his patience was wearing thin. The fight with the newest magician last night was an enormous letdown.
そういうな。私も昨日は拍子抜けだったんだから。
いいけどね。実はあの子、使わないんじゃなくて、使えないだけじゃないの？
Oh, Aoko? Why she ain't using magic? Capital M magic? His master's expression turned serious. Not in agreement at the wolf's question, though. For she had already asked herself the same and many other similar questions.
いや、使うぐらいなら死んだ方がマシなのかもな。
What is it? Her little rebellion against, becoming fully the mage Aoko instead of the normal person Aoko?
使わないと死んじゃう状態だったんだよ。
だから、そんなバカな考えが成立するぐらい。
That it must be too terrifying to use, Toko finished in her head. She stopped short of voicing it and chuckled at her emotional outburst.
どれほどのものか想像がつかないのは確かだ。だがまあ、根本は変わらないさ。魔法がどのような奇跡神秘の類であれ、魔術師である以上。
With those words, Beo's master walked out of the room, emphasizing that his role in all this was to face Aoko only at that very moment.
魔法ね。
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The bored look in his eyes shifted. He recalled the taste of that girl, his long tongue sliding over his chainsaw-like fangs. Make no mistake, he would finish his meal. He was the oldest werewolf, the golden god of the forest. For as long as he could remember, no, from the moment he appeared, he had been the most powerful creature of all. All man-made mystics were trash before him. Magecraft was laughable, and mystic artificial miracles, which even surpassed that, were superfluous, futile. Their very existence was an insult to him.
もちろん、そういう契約だし、ちゃんと平げはするけれど。
That was the extent of their pact. Once he had dealt with this so-called true magic, he was free. His eyes burned with the wolf inside of him. His fanged maw twisted into a sadistic, beastly grin. It was just past 7 p.m. Nisaki High School's old building stood silent. While light from the city reached the area, the forest and mountains kept the area hushed. Nothing unusual. During winter vacation, the old building, now still covered in yesterday's snow, was rarely used. Without signs of life, such unused structures were mere monuments of what once was, nothing more. The old school building would remain that way until the start of the new semester. Behind it, the vast forest grew darker by the minute. If the building had died in just under 2 weeks of vacation, what had become of the forest over the years? The wall of overgrown trees filtered out the noise of the city and most of the moonlight. An otherworldly realm had taken root, not even 2 miles away from town. Piercing the cold night air, footsteps crunching through the powdery snow.
この辺りに仕掛けはなさそうね。それでどうするの？このまま旧校舎に忍び込む？まさか私らがやってきたことなんて
no point being
とっくに
sneaky.
バレてるわ。隠れても意味はないし、何より敵のアジトに入ってどうするのよ。盗みが目的じゃないでしょ。
Oh, it's a shitty old wood building, just burn it down.
後ろから切りつけ
Throw
る
some
のは
Molotovs at it or
強
something.
盗というのじゃなくて。それができれば苦
A
労
little
は
bit
ない
of
んだけ
arson
ど
to kill the
ね。
time.
まあ忍者の真似事は私というかアリスの芸風じゃないでしょ。そもそもやる気満々なのはこっちもあっちも同じってこと。
The sound of their footsteps stopped in unison. The old, forgotten Misaki high school building stood before them. What had used to be the schoolyard was now a barren snowscape. Reclaimed by the forest, the building looked a shell of its former self. The surrounding trees resembled standing mourners at a funeral.
せっかちなお嬢さん方だ。タイムリミットまであと4時間はあるというのに。
So, like, walking in the snow in those heels, you're gonna get, like, snow inside your shoes. Alone in the middle of the white altar was the lone, scarred red mage. As she came out of the forest, Aoko lowered herself slightly, scowling at her distant target. Next to her, Alice stood motionless. The bare branches of the trees cast long, thorny shadows. Aoko was reminded of Sleeping Beauty, except this mage wasn't nearly as pleasant as the princess in that. Oh god, who's the princess in Sleeping Beauty? Is her name Aurora? You know, the one with absolutely, like, no character? Yeah, okay. I think I'm right. Don't correct me if I'm wrong, I don't care. Not to mention she wasn't sleeping, and there was no prince. Regardless, this princess came out of her schoolhouse castle to greet her challengers.
その体で無理をして。あなたのそういうところ、姉としてどうかと思う
Oh,
わ。
I'm sure.
青子。
Toko grinned faintly. Aoko fought back the urge to respond. Meanwhile, Alice stood in silence, uninterested in sibling rivalry. Toko stood about 100 feet away. With their senses sharpened through magecraft and the silence of the forest, they could hear each other perfectly. They could hear me sneeze. Ugh. Golden Wolf was nowhere to be seen. Toko faced the two girls alone. Alice's black overcoat and winter hat were typical items of clothing for a mage battle. A few paces in front of her was Aoko, whose combat garb was comparatively out of place, a Misaki High School uniform. She had asked Alice to bring a change of clothes for her, but there must have been some misunderstanding. Though it was a trivial miscommunication, Toko seemed to think it had some special meaning.
ところで、
Well, you're at school,
始め
so
る
why
前
wouldn't
に
you wear
一
a
ついい
uniform?
かな。気になって仕方がないし、この先機会もないだろうから聞くんだけど。あな
There's such a long pause there, Togo. That one's your own fault. Togo spoke clearly, and despite the distance, was able to communicate her deep-seated scorn without trouble. Aoko would rather attack than engage in small talk, but she decided to take the bait.
そんなわけないでしょ。今までこういう機会が多かっただけよ。数えるなら今日を含めて4回しかないわ。私はまだ現役だからそれも悪くはないかもしれないけど、いつか流行るでしょ、こういうのも。
Aoko was sure to emphasize her words. For a split second, Toko's eyes narrowed.
呆れたな。相変わらずのローセンスだ。
それはどうも。人形を実の妹に見立てる異常者にそう言われるなら、一周回って安心よ。
With that, the two fell silent and glared at each other. Their bloodlust cut through the thick, cold air like a knife. While the two of them sized each other up, Alice surveyed the area around Toko. There's no indication anyone or anything was lying in wait near her. Perhaps she should see if the werewolf was still in the old school building. Maybe Toko didn't feel like Aoko and Alice were that much of a threat in their injured state. Or she was really not expecting a counterattack so early, so the werewolf wasn't ready? After some contemplation, Alice surmised it was the former. She really was going to fight them alone. Her arsenal comprised her mystic eyes and rune magecraft. That was more than enough to deal with Aoko and Alice in their current state. Alice, all I need is one shot. Aoko signaled to Alice behind her with the movement of her finger. Alice had no objections. The original plan was for her to keep the werewolf busy. With the mirror as backup, Aoko was hoping to catch Toko off guard. They had a few other cards up their sleeves, but the fact remained that as mages, their attacks would not affect the werewolf. So they decided to ignore it and focus on taking out Toko. Yeah, it's just a stage hazard. Can't do nothing about it. Not the best strategy, but it was all the two of them could come up with. But they had been thrown a curveball. Toko had the upper hand, so she was reluctant to use the beast. Aoko wasn't about to let this opportunity go to waste. By distracting her with sibling banter, she would settle things before the werewolf even showed up. So many W's there.
今度はこっちの番ね。どう？結界の張り直しは進んでる？
まさか昨日の今日よ。まだ手をつけてもいない。せいてはことを仕損じる。だいたい私の目的は霊脈の奥にあるもので、結界そのものじゃない。張りまあ土地を暴くなんて面倒な真似をするより、お前を暴いた方が早いのかもしれない。
やっぱりそれが目的だったのね。ならなおのこと、あんたを魔法使いにするわけにはいかないわ。
Aoko's blue eyes burned brightly with a fiery fighting spirit. Even though her sister was ready to pounce, Toko remained motionless but for her mouth, which twisted into a smirk.
魔法使いか。確かにまだ執着はあるね。
I don't know, Toko. I don't think I trust you with true magic.
私には移植されなかった魔術刻印と青崎の伝える魔法の正体。だがもういいよ。惜しくはあるが、到達すればどちらも自分で用意できる。それとも、今ここで私のために魔法の正体を見せてくれるのかい？青子。
Toko's words came out flatly, but her eyes mocked her sister. It was true, however, that if Aoko wanted to defeat Toko, her best chance would be to use the mysterious true magic. The only problem was that she couldn't. If she could, she would have used it to avoid being mauled last night. Aoko Ozaki couldn't use true magic. Toko believed she needed to fulfill some kind of condition. The protection their grandfather placed on the formulae, I don't know, was to prohibit miracles from being easily released. However, that wasn't because he was concerned about the human world. It's no exaggeration to say he'd feel nothing if magic leveled the entire city. The truth was, true magic never had any conditions. Aoko was being held back by trauma. Those 5 privileges, the only powers of their kind, were bound by cognitive seals. That's why Toko looked down on her naive little sister. So weak, body incapable of handling magic could be cut down with a mere sword. Aoko knew better than anyone else, which is why she couldn't forgive her sister's ridicule. Just try using true magic, huh? A pathetic taunt. If that was how she wanted to play, then so be it.
ええ、お望みとあらばね。
With a burst of pure rage, Aoko made her move. Her colorless shoes sped across the untainted snowfield. Like a stone skipping across the water. As Aoko charged forward, she disappeared. Only her footprints advanced, like bullet holes in the snow. Toko held her ground. Concealment was elementary magecraft. More than likely, the power came from one of Alice's trinkets. It was a simple yet effective countermeasure to Mystic Eyes. Toko's Mystic Eyes used the lock property to bind an opponent, did not have the Logos property to discern truth through an illusion. Okay. Just technobabble me, it's fine. Once a magecraft's workings were revealed, its weakness was exposed.
足癖が悪いのも変わらず。
In a mere 4 seconds, her opponent had closed 10 yards and was still speeding up. It appeared that she had given up on a mage battle and was going to move in for melee. The other girl, Alice Kuonji, didn't take a single step.
被弾覚悟の特攻。アリスから5歩でももらっているのでしょうけど、反省なさい、青子。切り札というものは、あくまで自己の力によるものを言うの。
Sneering, Toko raised her left arm, holding it out in front of her threateningly. 10 more yards. Unfortunately, her footprints gave away her position.
そう。
Toko began engraving a rune into the air. But before she could finish, Aoko's footprint stopped. She was still too far away for close combat. A strange place to end her attack, unless, she jumped. No, wait. Could she really stop so suddenly at that speed?
飛んだか。
Toko made a snap decision. She quickly raised her outstretched arm towards the sky as if saluting the moon.
添える。
Flames tore through the air. The rune carved into the body above her, bathing it in a pillar of flames. No internal resistance spell could help. Rather than simply burn their target, the runes warped them in a wreath of flame, wrapped. The assailant screamed, falling to the snow-covered ground. In agony, she extended a burning hand out from the hellish fire, as if begging for mercy. It was the stuff of nightmares. The snow melted as the fire burned the attacker alive. Chirp, chirp. The movement was far too theatrical to be Aoko. You hammed it up too much. A little too hard in the kayfabe there, Robin. Toko had already turned her gaze to Alice. She hadn't been watching the burning corpse at all. Toko knew it wasn't Aoko from the moment the body fell to the ground.
アインスターの使い魔は何匹いる。
Irritated, Toko glared at Alice. While Aoko had vanished into thin air, she hadn't moved at all. Blue energy traced a circle around where she stood. It was forced to fourth, a 4-bar grand magecraft, mobilizing her magic crest. That was a lot of words in that sentence. Toko only had single action runes. No, she hadn't mastered anything above 2 bars to begin with. This torrent of energy was too much to handle.
えい言わず。
The rune formed in the magic circle. It was, sure, it's like German or something, I don't know, I can't pronounce German. The rune of withdrawal was invoked and Aoko's concealment was undone, allowing Toko to utilize her mystic eyes. Within her opponent's pupil, the infinitely mirrored eyes captured the target in an endless hell. But the mage's sight was literally split in two. The space in front of Aoko distorted, obscuring her form like an icy mist. If Toko's eye was like opposing mirrors, then this was like sticking a one-way mirror in a triangulation point. At the triangulation point. Oh god. Sure. With her vision split in two, she couldn't lock on to Aoko.
御水の鏡の効果よ、瞳子さん。青子は鏡の Y 字路の奥にいる。一本道から見ているあなたに中心は見渡せない。
Cool. Alice explained without concern. Due to the herb Toko made Alice swallow, she was still unable to use her own magecraft. However, she could use ploys already in motion without using magical energy, such as the mansion's mirror and the aimless little blue bird. Finally, the magic bullet was loaded.
セット、ルート、ディレクトカーラット。
Raising her right arm to reveal her luminescent crest, Aoko took aim at her target 100 feet ahead. Magical energy coursed through her gun barrel arm. From the moment she had received Alice's invisibility, Aoko had begun chanting her magecraft. It took Toko a few seconds to notice. Aoko produced more spins in the awakened magic crest than she had ever done before. She ready not snap nor draw. Instead, she advanced past her third process, a compression of magical energy, magic blow. If she fired the blue ether that gathered before her, it would fly with the force of 10 tons. Using her magic crest to multiply the energy and machine gun her target, it was enough power to demolish even the old building behind her.
Taka!
Aoko stared intently at her sister, ready to fire. Toko had no time to counterattack, or even the speed to evade. The fact that she didn't move implied she knew that better than anyone. Acceptance filled her eyes, not fear. Aoko didn't hesitate. She squeezed the trigger on her right hand. Magic bullet, configuration, convergent launch, circuit fire. Last words came out like a scream. Under the impact of the ether, the surrounding snow melted and flew around. Toko was engulfed in dirt. No way she could have survived Aoko's magic bullet. It contained every bit of Aoko's magical energy she could muster. Viewing the chaos, Aoko confirmed her victory. And yet, somehow she felt bitter. But then, choosing to deal with the torrent of magical energy she swallowed up later, Toko tutted at Aoko's childishness. Her disappointment was so deep it bordered on despair.
学ぶにしては遅すぎたが、まあ聞いておけ青子。切り札というものは先に出した方の負けなんだよ。
Her voice cold and aloof, she was completely unscathed. The mage stood in the snowfield, not a single speck of dirt on her overcoat. Just before the bullet reached Toko, she deflected it with magical energy of the same level. Toko could only stare at the scene before her. The negation of her mage... Oh god, that Aoko could only stare at the scene before her. God, fucking names so similar. The negation of her magecraft hadn't shocked her, though. Leaf-like objects floated behind her sister. Aoko stared like she was living a nightmare. Countless magic crest poured out from Toko's back. It all happened in an instant. The magic bullet approaching like a tsunami, Toko lightly snapped her fingers, causing a stream of letters to rush out from behind her. Text became art. Golden flowers bloomed. It must have been hundreds. All sorts of magecraft from even beyond Western Europe. The kind normally carved into the flesh of a mage. The kind Toko Ozaki shouldn't possess. The kind only followers of those schools should know. Blossoming magic crests, brighter than the moon. Inscribed in the air, they formed a totem pole, a guardian beast to protect Toko.
と、まあこういうわけだ。ベオだけに頼ってはいないことがよくわかったろ。
Toko's expression was steely. Victory was in her grasp, and there was no room to rest on her laurels.
姿を隠したのは鏡の応用か。探知や隔離だけでなく、援護まで行えるとはね。三大のプロイには含まれないものの、汎用性の面で言えば、あれも破格のプロイだな。
It's very simple.
持ち上げるじゃない。何？騙された負け惜しみ？いや、
ただの自画自賛だよ。何しろ今のバージョンは私とマインスターの合作だ。趣味に興じすぎてあれこれと機能を足してしまったと今更ながら悔いているところさ。
You know, bells and whistles, why not? Makes everything better.
青子に見せかけて私に向かってきたのは例のコマドリ。それに気を取られている間の大規模な魔術の発動。私の魔眼はアリスが防ぎ、青子は攻撃だけに専念する。組み立ては悪くはない。よくやったと言っておくよ。
Toko recounted their strategy, sharing her impressions as she went. Aoko could not take her eyes off Toko's blooming magic crest. Only Alice was paying close attention to Toko's words.
しかし、それもここまでだ。惜しいな、青子。わずか2年であれだけの魔術を使えるのなら、あと数年もすれば一流の射手になっていただろうに。
Toko snapped her fingers again. The floating crest began to glow more brightly.
アリス、あれは何？
Aoko whispered to Alice standing next to her as she held her hand. She couldn't risk not turning around. She could not risk turning around. The second she took her eyes off Toko, the fight would be over.
見ての通り、魔術刻印よ。信じられないけど。
Yeah, but they shouldn't be floating around like that, should they? Alice's voice was filled with shock and discomfort. Aoko shared Alice's sentiment. Magic crests were passed down through a family line and took unique forms. At heart, they were merely personalized inscriptions, and technically no different than from grimoires. However, the reality was far different. Magecraft had no set form. Without a set shape, the ability to recreate mystics was itself flawed. To craft it into a form required an immeasurable investment of time and devotion. Magic crests were the crystallization of a family's desires and ambitions, and proof of a successor's lineage. Crests had no effects on their own, but they were the ultimate symbol of a family. If no mage was unwilling to imbue themselves with a crest, or lacked the resolve to merge with it, then the crest's meaning was lost. That was the key difference between a crest and a mere spellbook. Crests could not be shared, and imitating them was pointless. It only stood to reason, then, that even if the crests manifesting behind Toko belonged to someone else, only the original owner could benefit from them.
でも、確かに私の魔弾はあの刻印からの魔術で弾かれた。あれは。
Searching for answers, Aoko squinted her eyes as she glared at Toko. She knew that copying a crest had no purpose. Only the original inheritor could invoke one. There was only one possible conclusion.
そう。肌に刻まず中空に浮かべてるのはそういうこと。
Aoko spat a curse at her sister. Toko nodded, pleased at her enemy's quick wit.
ああ、この体には合わないのでな。私の背後の空間に固定している。本当はね、お前たちのように肉に刻んだ方がいいんだ。魔術の起動が一動作で済むんだから。
So, who do you pilfer them from?
だが実際に使用するのなら、こうするしかない。 起動までの手順は一つ増えるが、マイナスばかりでもない。所詮
Seems neither physically nor mentally. Aoko knew her sister was inhuman, but she never thought she'd go this far.
会うわけないじゃない。他人の魔術刻印を剥がしてるんだから、血筋の称号からして馴染むはずがないわ。で、奪われた連中は死ぬこともできず、今もどこかに生かされているわけだ。刻印の持ち主が死んだら起動すらできないものね、それ。
瞳子さん、あなた
非難される覚えはないんだが、私はかかる火の粉を払っただけだよ。向こうから戦いを挑んできたんだから、戦利品ぐらいは用意してもらわないと。まあ、中にはつまらない単語を口にしたバカ者もいるが、むしろ優しいと思うけどね。私を殺しに来た連中をわざわざ生かしてあげてるんだから。
What, his little fucking meat batteries?
その魔
Fucking
術
pickled in a
師たちが
jar?
ちゃんと人間の形をしてることを祈るわ。
お前ね、私を何だと思ってるんだ。
I call it morbid curiosity.
脳だけ保存とか、面倒だから100人ひとまとめにした肉塊とか、そんな手抜きなんぞするものか。きちんとカフェを用意して、食事も娯楽も睡眠も自由に提供してるんだぞ。中には一生ここで暮らしたいなんて騒ぎ立てるバカもいるぐらいだ。
Toko's words were hardly believable, but it was clear her crests weren't copies. Alice's scowl deepened. What Toko had described had no disconcertible benefit in her mind. Why had she gone to the trouble of stealing others' magic crests? Oh, because she's at a pretty big disadvantage just being, I guess, technically like a Generation 1 mage now, because she doesn't have the family crest. It would have been more efficient to break down the crest into components and make replicas. For a skilled puppet master like Toko, she could have made a much more powerful puppet with those crests. It would have made a pawn loyal to her and every command at that, much more useful than any enslaved mage.
なんでそんなことを？
そういう人なのよ、姉貴は。これで行くと決めたらそれしか目に入らない人なの。家庭より結果の人なの。ある日の話よ。テレビでピザの CM をやっててさ、私たちは唐突にあのデブ食を食べたくなった。でも悲しいかな。一般家庭であるうちにあったのはサラミだけ。うちの実家、山奥にあるの知ってるでしょ。町まで行くのに1時間はかかる。中学1年だった私は我慢できなくて町まで行ったけど、ピザ屋なんか一軒もなくてとぼとぼ帰ったの。
You going somewhere with this? It was the tragedy of living in the countryside. Misaki, which had only recently gotten a conveyor belt sushi restaurant, would not see a pizzeria for another 2 years.
なのに骨折り損で家に帰ったら、姉貴のやつ「おかえり」とか手を振ってピザ食べてやがったのよ。おせんべいを下地にしてみたわとか言って、外見たら鳥3羽と牛1頭丸々消えてて、ああこの女には10日交換とか手間とかお金の問題とかそういうの一切頭にないんだって思い知らされたわ。
Okay. Alice agreed that that was pretty crazy.
そんな無茶なやつだから、ガンド打ちで目に見える傷跡を出そうなんて平気で考えるのよね。あんなのゲマトリア一節分の栄唱で同じ効果を出せるのに、あくまで呪術にこだわるから空も飛べない人形になるのよ、バカ兄貴。
Thought of a puppet doppelganger made her blood boil. It was clear to Aoko now that Toko had done it on purpose to annoy her. Toko furrowed her eyebrows at Aoko's verbal assault. She had been stoic until now, but speaking rudely about her prized puppet was crossing the line.
その人形に追い詰められたのは
What a true artist.
お前だったね。それとゲマトリアはカバラの秘術だ。私はルーン専門だから お前のように広く浅く知識を広める気はないよ。まあもっともこの刻印の所有者の一人からケルトの結界を教わりはしたがね。
Toko looked at the crests over her left shoulder. Its shine was ever radiant, proving that its magecraft was active.
これは城で祖父を封じ込めるのに使っていてね。犯人汎用のドルイド層を閉じ込めたとまではいかないが、そうだな。私では郵便ポストぐらいの大きさが限界か。ほら、昔お前が壊した赤いポスト、ちょうどあれぐらいの可愛い鳥小屋だよ。人間一人分をしまうには窮屈だろうが、祖父は肉体というより霊体に近い。
Or was that like just more of a
そっちの方が
snide
ふさわ
insult
しいかもしれないね。
than fact? Toko stifled a sinister laugh, her explanation chilling. Her cold veneer seemed to slip slightly when it came to her grandfather, her smile betraying the long festering hatred she still clung to.
そういったわけでね。さっきの青子の魔術を防いだので、この刻印もしばらくは使用不能なんだ。
Is that why we're having this talk? To buy time?
今のが本当の魔法だったなら、わずか3行の刻印では打ち消せなかっただろうに。青、じゃあ、
God damn, Toko, you
そ
take
ろ
such
そ
long
ろ終わりに
pauses.
しよう。抵抗をするのは自由だが、ベオ相手にそれは辛いぞ。
Toko snapped her fingers one more time. The golden werewolf was hiding in the old school building. The signal to him echoed eerily throughout the surrounding woods. Before the echo stopped, Aoko shouted back at Alice.
行ってアリス。
The order sounded like a reprimand, but Alice silently obeyed. Without hesitation, she left Aoko behind to handle Toko and made for the forest. If defeat was inevitable, it would be pointless for both of them to die. If one of them could survive, there could be around 3. That was why Aoko decided to be the sacrificial pawn.
トウコ自身の切り札も分かったし、アリスが本調子になれば勝てない相手じゃないものね。
Aoko muttered bitterly to herself as Alice's feet crunched through the snow. Instead of cursing her own death, she cursed the fact that she could not see Alice defeat Toko. For what else was there to curse except this? Alice disappeared into the forest. Feeling her fellow mage's presence fade, Aoko continued to glare at her sister.
いつまでじらす気？私、待たされるのは好きじゃないんだけど。
Speaking of waiting, the werewolf Toko had called was nowhere to be seen. It should not have taken him more than a few seconds to come flying out of the old school building.
そうせくな。今赤ずきんを追っているところだ。黒帽子の彼女をそう例えるのは、やや無理があるがね。
Her tone reeked of irony. The words traveled aimlessly across the schoolyard like a rambling announcement. Aoko stood frozen and dumbfounded. Everything Toko was saying seemed so far away from reality. Aoko was done with being fooled, so she turned around. The moonlight shining off the fallen snow allowed her to see far into the forest. From the white darkness, a lone boy came to view, walking towards her. He could not have been any taller than Aoko's chest, but he carried Alice over his shoulder with ease. As if she was nothing, he tossed her body upwards. She arced through the air for several feet before dropping headfirst before Aoko's eyes. Her neck would snap on impact. Even though she was the wiser not to, Aoko reached out to caught her. Alice's light body weighed heavy as she fell into Aoko's arms. The stitches on her wounds tore open, dyeing Aoko's arms crimson. Aoko gritted her teeth, fighting the pain that shot through her body and the sensation of the warm blood.
アリス、無事。
Take that as a yes. Alice did not respond, but Aoko could see that she was at least conscious. The werewolf must have ambushed her right after she ran into the woods. Alice bled heavily from where the wolf tore her abdomen open last night, just like he had done to Aoko.
初めから森に潜ませていたとはね。
Cursing her own carelessness, she gently lay Alice's body down. She set her sights on the blonde-haired boy, her new target.
つまりあれよね。甘く見ていたふりで初めから余裕なかったんだ。
Even in the face of Aoko's rage, he did not stop smirking. Can you really call that a smirk? I guess you can. He stared back at the girls, eyes gleaming, twinkling with excitement at the brutality to come. The blonde hair and green eyes she saw last night, and his effeminate features now, seemed ethereal, like he had changed into a being from another planet.
レオ、今日は食っていいぞ。
Toko's voice echoed from afar. The boy's grin broadened. Nobody could have expected what came next. Aoko rushed headfirst at the boy. Faster than the robin decoy, she sped, blood dripping from both arms. Toko watched wide-eyed at the spectacle. Alice could only look on with vacant eyes as she lay helpless on the ground. The werewolf boy was caught off guard by the prey becoming predator. Aoko crossed a 20-foot gap in a second before planting a foot in the snow. It arrested her momentum and pivoted her body like a top. Even if he instantly understood what was coming, the boy would be unable to dodge in time. Using the momentum from her sprint, she pushed her leg into the ground and sprang up. With deadly timing, her roundhouse kick swung in a wide arc towards the boy's neck, sending an explosion of force to his brainstem. It was an expert display of martial arts, strengthened by magical energy. She'd gotten the hang of close combat while fighting Toko's puppets. The violent kick was powerful enough to shatter a tree trunk. The boy did not move. Ako's right shin connected firmly and stopped. A shockwave rippled through his neck. It was the same feedback Aoko had felt when she destroyed the puppet. Even if he wasn't defeated, she had to have severely damaged his spine. As she looked at him to confirm her kill, the boy simply stared back at her, not even bothering to twitch an eyebrow.
お姉さんの右足は確か噛み切った方だ。
I got a bit of a taste of the dark meat?
それで首を狙ったのはすごいよね。
Is thigh the dark meat,
女
or
の
is it
人は
breast that's
本
the
能
dark
的
meat?
に
I can't remember.
自分の体をかばうものだって瞳子さんは言ってたのに。けど残念。せっかくの勇気も無駄でした。僕の体毛の質はこの姿でも変わらない。産毛だけでもお姉さんの蹴りを受け止めることはできる。
The only one hurt between the two was Aoko. The leg she had lodged in his neck was totally numb, like it had just been chopped clean off with a hatchet.
それに少しだけ迷いがあったな。くっつけたばっかりの足だからかばったでしょ。人間が僕の相手をするならそんなこと気にしちゃいけないのに。ああ。
The boy smiled, basking in Aoko's shock and awe. She could not free her leg. No doubt, as soon as she regained her footing, he would tear her stomach open.
どっちにしろミンチだから気にしても仕方がないよね。
Yeah, monologue at us.
ほら、もったいない。せっかく治ったばかりなのに。
Aoko was not sure, but it felt like he had stuck his finger into the flesh of her right leg. It was right about her leg. She barely had any feeling in it. It had been completely paralyzed after the last attack, and was now back in the same horrid state. Except this time, instead of being torn to pieces, it had been crushed to the bone. Her leg might have been numb, but just the look of it was enough to horrify her. The way it was crumpling, all the blood. Any normal person would have died from shock. As if thinking about someone else, Aoko considered how cruel Magic Crest could be.
あれ、まだ目が死んでない。
Yeah, you're making this hard on both of us. Come on. The boy thrust his hand out at Aoko's chest. Her consciousness flickered from the sudden pain of a child's fist piercing her torso. The scenery flew by. She soared through the air like a rag doll tossed away by a bored child. Just like Alice a moment ago, she tumbled through the air and hit the ground hard. Well, that don't feel no good. Her right leg was crushed. Her chest caved in. It was as if her heart had been scooped out of her chest. Each gasp of breath left her wanting more. Was this what it was like to see stars? Yeah, it's pretty doesn't feel too good when you hit your head hard enough and you see stars. The terrifying part was the pain. It never let up. Desperately trying to suck in oxygen, she could still feel his fist. Leisurely, the boy strolled across the snow towards Aoko's broken body, his red tongue gliding over his lips. He stared at his prey, who was desperately trying to breathe, his eyes filled with glee. Aoko bit down the temptation to drift away, even though she could find no reason to fight on. The snow had broken her fall slightly, but her death was all but certain. The fist-sized crater in her chest and her mangled leg made sure of that. Even though she knew she was a broken mess, Magic Crest frantically worked to resuscitate her heart. But why? The sight of Toko in the distance was the only thing that kept her conscious. Her sister looked surprised for some reason, like she was witnessing some strange phenomena that was unlike her. Wondering what it was, Aoko tried to stay conscious. Feebly trying to raise her head, she looked to where Toko was staring. Why did she look like that when she was so close to victory? Words are hard to say at a constant state. His heart was beating faster than normal. The fragmented and disturbed images kept returning, and he desperately pushed them to the back of his mind. There were thoughts that shook his resolve. He did his best to file them away into an unseen corner of his consciousness. Right now, he could only focus on controlling his breathing and his exertion. Just stay calm, he repeated to himself. He had not stopped for a second since leaving the church, even without giving a thought as to what he would do next. So many traffic lights, so many people. It was Christmas. There was no way he would find a taxi. Waiting for one was not an option. It was why he had put his trust in his legs. He dashed through the city streets. He had to find a shorter route than last night. His heart was ready to jump out of his chest, pounding like a hammer against a fire bell. He had no intention of giving up yet, but he could not seem to calm himself down. In his precarious condition, even surrender seemed too great of an effort to spare. Visions of horrible outcomes flashed through his mind. No, calm. He needed to stay calm. That was his only weapon. He was painfully aware he was powerless. The best thing he could do was to keep his head on straight. While he wrangled with his mind, his pulse seemed to quicken with every step. The forest was faintly lit by the moon. That was more than enough on such a bare mountain. He followed the two sets of footprints. Ahead lay a situation he had nothing to do with, just like at the amusement park. Even if you go there, there's nothing you can do for them. only effect her admonishing words had was to hasten his pace. He pushed the ground with his legs even harder, trying to leave his doubt in the kicked-up snow behind him. Of course he was powerless. The pain in his chest told him so. At best, he would be useless. At the worst, he would be a liability. He recalled the binding spell placed on him at the church. It did not matter. His body told him he would regret being torn to pieces less than if he did nothing. Not once did his legs fail him as he ran through the woods, though it felt as though his heart could at a moment. His weakness screamed at him from within. Just like back at the amusement park. He was beyond reason or circumstances now. Ultimately, I just want to help her. That was all he really desired. His heart pounded with vigor. As he ran through the dark, wintry forest, only one thing gnawed at his mind. Not concern for the girls, nor anger towards Toko. The red rose bursting forth from her limbs. Screams of agony, like childbirth. The harsh reality of something beautiful dying. The nightmare was tenacious. Never again. Never again did he want to see something like that again, if he could help it. Just ahead was the forest clearing. The moonlight shone on the old school building like a spotlight. Once again, those thoughts crept back. He could not bear seeing something like that again. That is why he ran. But if he had to face it a second time, how could he stay calm? With that thought in mind, he arrived at the clearing. Somehow, his frantic breathing, his rising and lowering shoulders stopped. No exhaustion, no inertia, just blankness, like his mind was frozen in time. This was the second time he had felt like this. But the nausea and dizziness from the first time, the pathetic whining of the last few weeks, doubts clouding his mind, they were all gone. Displaced entirely from his mind by an even stronger emotion. His heart pounded with the force of a sledgehammer. It was a primal sound, loud enough to bring him to his senses. Sojiro stepped into the clearing, letting out a deep but steady exhale. Although his eyes were locked with the blonde-haired boys, his concentration was focused inwards. Be calm, be calm. Every fiber of his being worked to control his breathing. The clearing told the story of Aoko and Alice's crushing defeat. Aoko was lying face up in the snow, her right leg bright red and crushed at the thigh. Her eyes were glazed over, but Sojiro could tell that she was still bravely fighting. Judging by her sputtering, she had taken a hard blow to the chest or back. Sojiro deduced it was most likely both. Alice's injuries seemed less serious than Aoko's, but she lay motionless on the ground nevertheless. She was lying across from Aoko, face down in the snow, arms out in front, as though pushing herself up was too painful. Before the old school building stood the figure of the mage he had seen before. Paying her no mind, Sojiro began to walk forward. Feeling calmer since arriving at the clearing, he advanced towards Aoko. Toko did nothing to stop him. No one noticed, but the faintest look of worry flickered in her eyes.
The
child werewolf spoke amicably, confident in his victory. Perhaps also eyeing up a new meal. Sojiro ignored him, kept walking towards Aoko. The complete disregard wiped the smile from the boy's face. Still, Sojiro carried on. The beast's feelings were the last thing on his mind. Once he reached Aoko, he looked down at her with a pained expression on his face. Strangely, he was at a loss for words. After a slight hesitation, all he could manage to say was,
なってないぞ、生徒会長。行く時ぐらい声をかけるものだろう。
His awkward remark was half scolding, half affectionate.
このバカ。
Despite the pain in her stomach, Aoko was able to throw an insult his way.
安心した。余裕あるじゃないか、青崎。
That means you're not dead yet. His voice brightened, as if buying her bravado. The truth was that she barely had the strength to live. Despite that, Sojiro looked like he wanted to respond in his usual way. Something like, "See, Ozaki? You're too tough to die, even when someone kills you." Oh my god. Because normally people die when they're killed. As soon as she tried to speak, she ran out of breath. Sojiro heard her loud and clear this time. He might have looked absent-minded, but he knew exactly how dangerous the situation was. Aoko knew because his carefree-sounding words did not match his expressionless face.
何のつもりで。
Before she could say doing, she coughed painfully. Sojiro pressed his fingers to his lips and nodded. Aoko could not quite believe it, but it looked as though Sojiro had gestured to her not to speak.
だってほら、状況はあの時と一緒だ。
Now just sticking his neck where it don't belong.
次はこっちの番なんだろ。だから協力をしに来たんじゃないか。まあ、何もできないのもあの時と変わってはいないんだけど。
Aoko did not know what to say. She could only look up at him, amazed and awed. The werewolf stared at them, visibly frustrated. After all, he believed himself to be the noblest of all creatures. Ignoring him was treason, punishable by death. Had Toko not been there, he would have sunk his teeth into Sojiro's neck by now. He was sure he had been intimidating enough. However, his prey did not show any signs of fear. It's hard to imagine, but maybe, just maybe, this guy did not view him as a threat.
まあ、誰でもいいんだけど、筋張った肉は歯ごたえがあっていいし、何より食い出がある。
Alright, who's gonna win? The collared, domesticated, fucking livestock guardian dog Sojiro versus the wild wolf?
先にそのお兄さんから始めても構わないよね。
The boy wolf called out once again. Still not responding, Sojiro raised a hand to his nose. Cool, calm, and collected. Paying no mind to the boy, yet keeping an eye on him.
匂うな。
Smells like wet dog. Everyone present was confused. No one seemed to be able to smell anything but him.
へえ。何が匂うっていうのかな。
The smell of a
お兄さん。
beast, wild animal. Bayo's voice retained his usual arrogance, but was tinged with impatience. The boy was unable to hide his irritation at being ignored. Finally, Sojiro turned to face the boy just a short distance from him.
品のない肉の匂いがする。これだから犬は嫌いなんだ。
His voice was filled with disgust and contempt. Sojiro was mainly speaking to himself, but the werewolf boy had never felt so insulted, even if it was not Sojiro's intent at all. In a moment, the wind picked up, perhaps signaling a change in the werewolf's mood. A fiery gale whipped around, carving patterns in the snow.
ソジロ。
Sensing he was about to be killed, Aoko desperately tried to move, but her broken body would not respond. After hearing Sojiro's insult, Alice was unsuccessfully struggling to get to her feet too. In complete contrast, Sojiro stood there, firmly and unfazed. The little blonde boy's well of patience had run dry.
そうか。要するに、僕が子供だからって舐めてるんだね。お兄さんは。
His time playing human was over. Enraged, the boy transformed. He grew larger and larger, golden fur sprouting from his pale flesh. His mouth grew razor-sharp fangs, his hands grew claws. Drawing from the magical energy in the air, it transformed into a preternatural? Okay. Preternatural beast, a wolf in the shape of a human.
重化の許しは出していないぞ、ベオ。
Joko yelled at him, but the werewolf did not respond. He only huffed deep breaths of hot air.
そんなバカな話が。
Oh, that's a neat trick. That was all Sojiro could say in response to the boy's metamorphosis. Such a transformation was the stuff of nightmares. What was worse, the beast now towered above him. It was enough to make anybody question reality itself. Seeing his prey's reaction satisfied the werewolf, and his maw twisted into a satisfied grin. He was a strange one, this guy, but meat was meat. However, the beast's arrogance was short-lived. The prey breathed a sigh of exasperation before speaking.
それじゃあ本当に犬そのものじゃないか。
You could hear a pin drop, even in the snow. Aoko, Alice, and Toka were all dumbfounded. Were they really seeing a human not just stare a werewolf down, but insult it to its face? They simply could not believe it. It was too late. Any trace of the wolf's pride or dignity faded away. The onlookers finally realized that the wolf was serious.
ベオ、殺すな。
Interesting that you care enough not to kill him? Okay. But Toko's command fell on deaf ears. The wolf prepared to lunge, his emerald eyes fixed on Sojiro not 30 feet in front of him. A mere 30 feet. Half second was all he needed. Another half second to bring his claws down and slice his prey from head to toe.
死んだよ、お前。
A roar of joyous, unbridled fury echoed far and wide. It was the only warning the wolf gave as he exploded towards Sojiro. 1 second. A golden blur swept forth in a furious gust, too fast for the eyes to follow. In the face of unworldly speed, there was only one thing to do. Sojiro stepped forward, a silent shadow opposite the beastly silhouette of the incoming werewolf. He needed exactly 3 paces. He bet his entire life on around 3 feet of distance. In the blink of an eye, death would be upon him. Yet, he did not show the slightest indication he intended to avoid the lunging behemoth. The wolf's forelegs slammed into the ground with earth-striking fury, shaking. You got a plan here, bud? His back muscles tensed up so much they seemed barely contained in his frame as he swept a raised paw downwards. Sojiro's small step neatly evaded the claws, but he had a different motive. He was merely positioning himself for the next move. His intention was never to avoid anything. In the beginning, his mind was focused on but one thing. A point to aim for. One mind. One breath. He picked the perfect opening in the wolf's torso, the precise microsecond between contraction and relaxation. The one point alone was a crack in the dam of life. He punched the werewolf in the chest with his feeble human strength. Yeah, saw that one coming. There was a dull thud and a burst of blood. The twisted flesh and gore were all Sojiro's own. The werewolf's raised claws convulsed. From an insignificant impact, the beast's body was the first to collapse, then his spirit. There was a moment of utter incomprehension. Same, bud. The wolf opened his jaws to try to pull air into his lungs. Gasping, he began to topple forward. A slender figure slipped down around his flank. The next blow pierced him like a spear. Ignoring his mangled left arm, the silhouette whirled around and drove his right elbow into the collapsing werewolf's back. There was another muffled impact. The second strike penetrated to the exact same spot the first strike had, crushing the beast's heart. This time, the blood that flew into the air belonged to the gasping wolf. Damn, you sure know your pressure points, huh? The werewolf fell to the ground, choking on its own blood. It did not get up. It showed no signs of life. It was over. There was no remorse, no hesitation in that brief act of violence. The perfect, furious, golden beast lay still, felled in a mere 3 seconds. Hey, Sojiro, you mind telling us about this village you're from? No sane person would have bet on this outcome. His breathing calm, the victor stood over the fallen behemoth's body. Even as the beast lay crumpled in the snow, he could not grasp what had happened. His heart had ruptured, cutting the blood flow to his body and brain, leaving him helpless. That much he knew. If he were a normal creature, he would be dead. As it was, this was a trifling inconvenience. Once his heart was repaired, his body would heal as well. It was not as if he had been struck by magecraft exceeding his own mystical nature. This was little different than a grazed knee. Which is why it was so strange. Your heart does not stop from a grazed knee. I think it was just a bad matchup. The werewolf frantically searched his memory. He managed to remember right up until the moment he raised his claws. But what had to come after that? Given the right transformation, he knew he could withstand even a cannon blast. Why might a puny human dropped him? Wait. Before that, he had to figure out exactly what his opponent did to him. The moment he got in close, yes, he had felt a small impact. The attack was so accurate that it probably only affected his heart. Ridiculous. Even if it was possible, there's no way that alone could stop a werewolf's heart. In the end, no matter how much he thought about it, nothing added up. The answer was out of reach for a werewolf with no knowledge of being backed into a corner, let alone the limits of human skill. Only one thing was certain: he had lost. He had tried to piece together the sequence of events. The explosion in his chest, the flash of white. After that, as if he was falling over, he took another blow to the back. That was the one that disrupted his heart. Could lose? Indeed. It was physically impossible. The boy gnashed his teeth and tensed his body in indignation at this unfair conclusion. Enough thinking. He was ready. On the ground, he glared at his enemy to his side. Damn, then explain what just happened. The very next moment, an unknown type of pain coursed down his spine. It had eyes, cold eyes, staring, piercing, colorless. The moon looked more alive. Its arms were broken. Its inhumanly powerful attack had mangled them beyond recognition. If it was in pain, it would have cried out, but it was silent. Was it ever alive? Those dead eyes. It's seen eyes like those before. Those eyes without hatred, without joy, without any feeling behind them at all. It was a mindless insect. The werewolf's hair stood on end. What was this creeping chill crawling up his spine? Having never experienced fear, the werewolf did not know what had become of him. Despite countless clashes against other mystics, it had been a human that broke him. He knew beasts even larger than himself. He knew legendary creatures like himself. He did not know this. He had never met, much less imagined, a human-sized bug. The chill down the werewolf's spine was so vicious it threatened to split him in two. If he moved even an inch, it would crush his skull underfoot. In spite of the despair gripping him, the boy paradoxically sensed that his opponent would not move at all. This human would exhibit no further violence. It was a creature, no, a stone, that held no animal instincts. It masqueraded as a human. The contradiction grated against his heart, his values. A phantom pain born of an unknown emotion, fear. It wasn't just grating, it was like many needles slowly digging into his heart. It had been his first taste of doubt, of reality. Such contradictions existed in the world, after all. They were irrationalities and questions you did not want to hear the answers to. The suppressed pain suddenly flowed through his body like a raging river. This was also a first. Up until now, he had always been able to control pain, never known what it was like to tremble. An elemental might have even felt sorry for him if it were here to watch. How sad. Born complete, yet lost to the lunacy of the human world. His heart had fully regenerated. Howling in mental agony, the beast clutched his own trembling body. Those eyes, those human eyes looked straight through him. And then, the boy realized the only reason he was still alive. Even with both arms broken, the human could have finished him off with its legs. But it mattered not, because his opponent was giving him a taste of his own medicine. This was not revenge for trying to kill him. This was revenge for the wounds he inflicted on the girls. Yeah, don't treat life so lightly now. Do you learn your lesson from this? The absurdity of it all made his throat tighten. His breathing was frantic. This human had no sense of self. It had no concern for its own safety when it stood between him and the girls. That must be why it had no hatred or fear, perhaps even intent to kill him. Indeed, the fact that he was alive had nothing to do with the human's will. The fight was machine-like, so was its judgment. An eye for an eye, nothing more. If the werewolf had killed one of the girls, this exchange would have ended differently. Yes. He shuddered at the thought. He never entertained such a possibility. He had never had to, because he was supposed to be the one exception to that rule. Agony kicked him hard in the gut. No matter the mystic, nothing was immune from injury, from decay. The boy finally understood an obvious law of the world. Rather, he had been taught. Those eyes, They would not stop staring down at him. Retribution was a universal law. He was now painfully aware of that fact. And yet, the one who brought form to this idea was this human. The pain of defeat, the pain in his heart, the pain of comprehending the incomprehensible. Pain, pain, pain. The impossibility of it all had shattered his perfect world. It ate at him, consumed every fiber of his being. The doubt made his head spin. It was too much. Humans were impossible to understand. He had not been made to face the death of another, but his own. Unable to cope, he reverted to his human form. Quietly. He shivered like a frightened child in a mother's lap. Still laying in the snow, Aoko choked on her words, unable to entirely comprehend what had unfolded. Same girl.
Sojiro, anta.
She could not hide the trembling in her voice. Speaking in his usual way, Sojiro nonchalantly turned towards her. Yeah, he taught him a lesson, gave him a taste of his own medicine. She shouted angrily, as though he had done something wrong. Sojiro looked surprised, wondering what on earth he had done to upset her. He lowered his gaze back to the wolf boy. Knitting his brow in dismay, Sojiro finally realized what Aoko was referring to. Yeah, he punched him. He looked at her in disappointment. Feeling slightly affronted, Aoko responded curtly. Sojiro sighed. Do you do this normally? Ako's jaw dropped. It took her a moment to process what he had just said. She recalled some meaningless conversation or another from who knows when. Yes, now that she thought about it, they had spoken about that. He'd mentioned being familiar with large beasts, and she could not deny that she'd heard him utter some anachronistic nonsense about training to deal with them. Which meant he was used to dealing with animals larger than himself. If he'd lived the sort of life that involved run-ins with wild bears, then a man-sized wolf might have only been surprising, but not particularly frightening. Aoko hung her head. After all this time, who was it that really made no sense? Well, prey doesn't normally fight back like that, so sure. It was hard to tell whether she spoke in admiration or exasperation. Either way, she was slouched in the snow. Aoko spoke quietly enough so only she could hear her words. Toko, on the other hand, understood exactly what had transpired. Bayo lay fallen, now just a sobbing boy, and another boy stood over him with two shattered arms. Near fatally wounded, Aoko and Alice still could not stand, but had recovered enough to breathe. As for Toko, she only had a few tricks up her sleeve, maybe 3 or more runes at best. The magic crests on her back were unusable. She could use the remaining magical power from the magical energy from the field imprisoning her grandfather, but that would be stupid. If she released her grandfather, she would lose ownership of the sacred ground. Failing to defeat Aoko and Alice now would mean starting over from square one. She could not afford that. Sibling rivalry had to end. Toko had gambled everything on her surprise attack, using the fact that she was still Naozaki to infiltrate Misaki's defenses. For 3 years she had labored, selling her work to the association. And she had used 20 years worth of hair to mobilize an army of familiars. It was now or never.
だが、私は失敗した。
She had overestimated the werewolf's power. It should have been enough. Against mages alone, Beowulf by himself would have been enough to ensure complete victory. But things did not always go according to plan. Beo's incredible strength was conditional. What, it had to be against mystics? She knew he was not infallible, but why hadn't she prepared a contingency plan? Her heart as cold as ice. Toko stared at Sojiro, who stood tall. His arms were a hideous mess. The arms he used to strike Beo head-on barely even resembled an arm. His bones were bent out of shape, his muscles were torn to shreds. To say his arm was simply broken would be a gross understatement. Streams of crimson ran down his other arm into the white snow. The elbow he drove into Beo's back was likely shattered, and his muscle and tendons torn up to his shoulder. Judging from the state of his arms, it was doubtful he would be able to use them again. Worse than his arms were his left leg, and no doubt his internal organs too. He had used the leg to take the full brunt of Beo's charge. At a glance, it looked fine, but it was now just a useless hunk of meat attached to his torso. His insides were worse. Supporting the weight of Beo had ruptured his spine, causing widespread internal bleeding. Basically, he was a dead man standing. A bird with clipped wings. Living that would not be living at all. Living like that. He could barely stand, let alone fight again. In contrast, the collapsed werewolf was unscathed. Only once had he coughed up blood. The majority of the pool of red on the snow was Sojiro's. A crimson tapestry telling the story of the boy who stood strong and defeated a werewolf.
当然だ。衝撃には反動が伴う。拳を振るうのなら相応の負担がある。まして相手は人狼。走ってくる鉄の壁を真っ向から殴るようなものだ。それを。
Yeah, but he managed to derail the freight train, I guess. Perhaps he had known what would happen. Animals instinctively limit their strength in order to protect their body. Compensating for physical weakness with intellect and technique was humanity's forte. That clash had shown humans at their very best, and yet it had also been beyond human. He had attacked without concern for his own safety. Without self-preservation of mind, he could go beyond human capability. Enough to strike through the steel-like fur of a legendary werewolf. But who would have thought that a beast able to withstand a shot from a tank would be felled by a mere human?
いや、違う。ためらうことなく殴りつけたから壊れたのではない。初めからあれは壊すことを前提にしていたな。
He sacrificed his entire body to destroy Beo's heart. Toko felt a chill come over her as she went over in her head what had transpired. Should have been a nightmarish scene, but she was captivated by the supreme display of physical rationality. From the outside looking in, she had witnessed not an accident, but a rational consequence. In that instant, the boy had put his entire being into piercing Beo's chest. As soon as he laid eyes on Aoko and Alice, he had committed himself fully to the task. He sized Beo up, synchronized his breathing, found his weak point, and calculated the exact position, timing, and distance he would need to hold his ground. He knew what he had to do to win, and did it with everything he had. It had nothing to do with instinct. A wild creature would not have tried to beat someone it could not. Only a human would risk his life when faced with the impossible. That contradiction fed his attack. He twisted his body from his heel to his neck to focus his energy. If Bayo had simply tried to run Sojiro down, the werewolf would have probably have won. But the beast wanted to rip him to shreds. Or rather, he was baited into doing so. After Bayo charged, when he planted his feet, he raised his claw and swung downward, putting himself off balance. His pulse was erratic, his movement wild. In that moment, he was vulnerable. That was when Sojiro had made his move. The beast had overwhelming power, but it was sloppy, whereas the human concentrated all of his meager power into a single point. That was how the human shifted the balance in his favor. A follow-up elbow attack would rupture Bayo's heart. It was a graceless second strike, a sloppy blow no different from Bayo's. The elbow was only able to penetrate the beast's gold fur because of the first attack to the chest.
あの時点でベオは丸裸にされていた。
He hit him with the discombobulate, and then he fucking finished him off.
無敵の人狼がその機能の一切を休止させられた。
Fucking took the paperclip and hit the recessed reset button.
つまり
Strike was not meant to break, but to disable. All living creatures had weaknesses. No matter how strong the creature, it had weak points and weak moments. Not just physically, but mentally too. A time when they aren't in their best shape, unable to focus or find motivation. Sickness or a lack of sleep or food, for example, can cause the body's rhythm to go out of sync. For a variety of reasons, intelligent beings risked losing their ability to function properly. Legendary beasts were no exception.
弱点、欠点をつく魔術なら知っているが、全てを投げ打って弱点を生むとはな。
The boy's strike to the heart was not an attempt to kill Bayo. It was designed to create a weakness in something that had none. The elbow strike took advantage of that break in Bayo's invulnerability.
加えて、笑えることに不意打ちですらない。ベオの神経の伝達速度なら、毒が当たった瞬間に感知し対応できる。
Yeah, but, you know, he thought he was invincible, so no need to.
だが、そもそもそれを毒と認識できなければ、変形のしようもない。毒ではないものが毒になるなんて落とし穴を、誰が教えてやれるものか。
Yeah, it's like, would you really react that much if a fly was trying to land on you? I mean, you might be like, ugh, but, you know, it won't hurt you. She was frustrated, to say the least. The boy was totally committed, utterly selfless. He had bet his life on that single moment without expecting a single thing in return. That boy had acquired the experience and skill to do such a thing. It was not a miracle of luck, nor a miracle of passion. It was not talent, tenacity, or hatred. Without constant, intensive training, no one could destroy their own body on a whim like that.
子供には相手が悪かったようね。
Seeing Bayo cowering in the snow, Aoko was disappointed in her own lack of foresight. She had used him for his talent alone, ignoring his inexperience. If Bayo was not a child, his life experience might have given him the strength to bounce back and devour Sojiro after regenerating.
ベオを責めるべきか、それとも君を評価すべきなのか。
That's a lesson to learn from. Aoko quietly lifted her left hand. Nobody noticed. Standing far away, the boy standing there looked like a hunter from a picture book. He had a slender build, but that was likely because he intentionally shed any excess. Given what she had just witnessed, his cluelessness had to have been part of an act, the act of a hunter. As she thought to herself, she suddenly remembered. The first thing that crossed her mind the first time they spoke.
そうだったな。だが、それは忘れていたかったよ、宗十郎君。
No sooner had she felt a slither of sentiment, she returned to her unshakable resolve. She was raised as the heiress to the heiress to the Aozaki household, taught never to question the morality of her actions. That was why, even now, she knew exactly what she had to do.
でも よかった。
Well, as well as it could have gone. Sojiro muttered, unmoving, perhaps because of the pain in his broken arms. Did not look at Aoko. Instead, his gaze was focused on Alice, who was lying prone some ways away. Aoko thought he looked lonely.
よかったって何がよ。
Well, you're both still breathing, so... They were mere steps from each other, close enough to touch hands. Was there another line there I forgot to read? Yeah, she asked to spur him on. The quiet voices carried into the stillness.
私たちが無事だったからなんて言ったら怒るわよ。
She was not joking. Sojiro turned away from her slightly, shaking his head.
口にするのは3度目だけど、青崎の心配はしていないんだ。いや、さっきはちょっと意識が飛んだようなんだけど。
That's probably due to, your spine having exploded. He said, as an embarrassed smile crossed his face. The first time, he outright fainted. But the second time, his passion pushed the dizziness and nausea aside. He just calmly did what he could as best he could. Nevertheless, no matter how calm he tried to be, deep within festered a very real rage.
じゃあ何が良かったのよ、宗次郎。
Well, he didn't vomit on the floor this time. Aoko's voice had a slight tinge of annoyance. Sojiro responded.
だって、ようやく約束が守れた。そっちだけが約束を守ってるのに、こっちは果たせなかっただろう。それがずっと気になっていたんだ。その機会があって、本当に良かった。
Man, why are you setting up your own death flags like this, bud? His relief expressed itself as a small but heartfelt smile. Aoko listened, astonished. For a moment, she could not recall what promise Sojiro was talking about. Once she remembered what he was talking about, and what she had told him all that time ago in the amusement park, her mind went blank.
あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら、俺のことは見逃してくれる？
He proposed the deal, but in the end, he hadn't been of any use. Must have been eating away at him this entire time. Aoko had considered the agreement binding, but only for herself.
あんなどうでもいいことを。
She muttered in disbelief. Sojiro gave a nod and affirmed with a tiny
約
voice.
束は自分のために果たすものだって教えてくれたのは青崎だ。だから君が守っている限り俺も守らないといけない。
Mm-hmm. You're your own harshest critic and all that.
ずっと俺はそうしたかったんだ。
What, now you can die peacefully? As if listening to a confessional, Aoko remained silent. She could not find the words to say anyway. Sojiro proved ever the enigma. Taking such a trivial promise so seriously, and speaking so sincerely about something so basic. She could not wrap her head around how he had beaten a werewolf, but his personality? Oh, that was a true mystery. There was no use trying to figure that out now. To Aoko Ozaki, he was a riddle wrapped in an enigma wrapped in a conundrum.
それじゃあ借りは返したから帳尻はゼロだ。これで貸し借りはなしだぞ、青崎。
Sojiro said lightly, perhaps attempting to break the silence. Normally, this would have passed her by, but she saw his kindness for what it was.
貸しがついたのはこっちの方よ。これじゃあどうやって返していいかわからないじゃない。
Maybe cut down his rent a little bit? Sojiro nodded in happy agreement.
それより青崎の足なんか塞がってるな。もしかしてもう立てるのか？
Or maybe cast a healing spell on his back? My mans here don't have a healing factor like you. She shot him a stubborn look as if to say, well, duh, obviously. Ever amazed by her grit, he offered her his right hand. Despite being broken at the elbow, Aoko looked at it. To Aoko, it looked as sturdy as ever. By all appearances, it was beyond recovery and would be for the rest of his life. Even so, he seemed able to ignore the pain for Aoko's sake.
ほんと、あんたってバカ。
she uttered under her breath, looking up at him. As much as she hated to admit, she could not refuse his hand. Resigning herself, she reached out to Sojiro. But her hand never reached his. A small bell chimed. A line of wind whipped through the air. It cut through his waist like a guillotine. Oof! You couldn't have done that more cleanly, Toko? Pieces began to fall. What were those dropping before her eyes? Aoko could not remember who they belonged to.
Sojiro?
That used to be his name, right? The name of whoever lay in the red snow in front of her. His face now rested on the ground beneath her chin. The smell of viscera assaulted her nostrils. A river of blood flowed from what used to be his stomach. It happened so fast. Too fast for her mind to process, in fact. Her only solace was he probably did not suffer. How could she think that so calmly, especially after what she had just witnessed? Her blood boiled at her own stupidity. Which begged the question, how should she treat the one who did this? She had used up all her anger on herself. She had none left to give anyone else. But this hatred was hers and hers alone. The problem was this. Could she muster the emotions from this drought of anger? She was not sure, but the thought of hunting them down made her smile unconsciously in anticipation. Aoko turned to the old school building, to where Toko was standing with her arms out in front of her. She had used the same rune magecraft she had used against Aoko and Alice, except Sojiro had no magic crests. Toko's amber eyes were narrowed, staring intently at the fallen corpse. As to what she might have been feeling, Aoko could not care less. Even if Toko felt regret, Aoko would never forgive her as long as she drew a breath.
やはり君からこうしておくべきだったな。
Toko was not speaking to Aoko, but to the dead body. There was no response, no clouds of breath. Coming to terms that he was truly dead, Aoko pushed herself up to her feet.
案外無様ね。
Facing her sister in the distance, Aoko spoke hoarsely.
でも正しい選択だわ。これで勝負はやり直しだもの。
She turned away from Sojiro and stared at Aoko. They stood far apart. Further apart than their positions made them seem. Though there was nothing left to say, the two of them exchanged words in respect to the fact that they were once sisters.
ああ、魔術刻印という私の切り札はこの通りで、人狼というカードもお前の切り札の前に敗れ去った。だが、そちらも刻印を使い切り、彼も今息絶えた。互いに決定打はなくなったわけだ。
そうね。私も甘かった。人狼が再起不能になった時点で、あなたが敗北を認めたなんて勝手に思い上がるんだ
I
か
mean,
ら。
you still got hands to throw.
本来ならそうなるんだけど、あなたがそんなに諦めがいいのなら、この町に戻ってきはしないものね。本当に甘かった。
It was clear to Toko that Aoko was trying to suppress her emotions. Aoko was right, though. Her sister had counted on Beowulf to succeed. As mages, no matter what cards Aoko or Alice had in their hands, they were helpless against a werewolf. But then, Sojiro had shown up, and Toko could not win as long as he was around. Unfortunately, though he had stopped the werewolf, he had been defenseless against a mage. So she had to kill him. With Sojiro out of the way, no one could hold Bayo back. It would take time for him to recover, but as long as his wounds were only mental, that could be overcome. Alice and Aoko could try to attack again before he recovered, but Alice was being kept in check by the poison, so Toko still had the advantage. Stalemate, still. The battle would drag on. Unless Aoko were to use it. Powdery snow began to whirl around. The air around her wailed. It was magecraft that transcended all that was mystical. The gate to miracles beyond human comprehension, ready to show itself.
やる気のようね、青子。
Toko released the crest maintaining the fields. With that, her grandfather would be freed, and the barriers around Misaki would be restored. Which was not what Toko wanted, but it was that or forfeit her life. The crests at her disposal were now twice as powerful as her sister's. Aoko gazed at the new threat with her eyes half closed. None of this was of her concern. Far removed from the situation, she was searching for something hidden deeper inside herself, desperate to reach it. There it was, an odd feeling, like picking up an algae. It was not the fire of emotion, it was not solid nor great. It must have been people... What? It must have been what people meant by rising to the occasion. Nice place to just completely forget a word there. Like, big climax, that's fine. Abandoning thought itself, Aoko held on to that feeling as she stared at her enemy.
いいわよ、トウコ。
She spoke softly, yet more loudly than a scream.
お望み通り、本当の魔法を見せてあげる。
Focusing her power into the dim crest on her right arm, she weaved the words together. A single incantation. A final, heartfelt farewell. A brilliant, blue-colored magic, taking time back to when a certain someone had been blessed. To put it simply, magecraft is human wisdom. It is the world as we know it. Magic is the singularity that exists beyond either of those. At the beginning, the first changed all. Next, the second recognized many. In answer, the third showed the future. Tethered, the fourth concealed itself. And the final fifth had long since lost its significance. Someone once said that it only ended at the third. Magecraft is the study of history, feats of our making, and life orbiting the planet. But true magic is the providence of a god beyond the heavens. Why do those who stand on Earth extol the virtues of miracles beyond humankind and the planet? This was an undeniable sin. Magic was the enemy of humanity. That is why those who obtain a new magic are killed by the Red Shadow.
聞け、万物の霊長。
Aoko's voice resonated through and high above the wintry skies. The air began to fracture, turning the scenery into broken glass. Toko wondered whether she should fight or flee. She decided to try and keep her feelings in check and see this through. But the object of her obsession for so many years was right in front of her. Rationality was slipping from her grasp. Both of their fates were now uncertain. Toko had an overwhelming advantage when it came to her crests and the terrain. When it came to true magic, however, if the Aozaki magic was anything like Alice Kuonji's fairy tale monsters, then mage strength was not a part of the equation. At this point, it was Toko against magic itself, and there was no winning against truth. The transcendence and idiosyncrasy of true magic rendered things like magecraft irrelevant.
だが
Toko stared at her sister, wondering if she could actually use it. Her proclamation lacked conviction. She had raised her voice, but that was out of discipline. It had not been the arrogant conviction to sacrifice someone else for her own gain. Having not been chosen to inherit it, Toko could not imagine what the magic in her sister was. Only that it was a force violent enough to change the world. No human mind could withstand the audacity required to make an enemy of the world itself. especially not someone as indecisive as her sister. The power of magic would surely cripple her. Feeling Toko's eyes on her, Aoko doubted herself. She could not help but hesitate. Terror gripped her heart tighter.
でもだからって
She could not run away forever. Her hesitation and terror meant she would never forgive herself for stopping now. Closing her eyes, she pushed herself into the final stage. Time stopped, like a light being switched off. She submerged herself in her own darkness. Everything froze, only she moved. Everything around her disappeared as she passed the limitless stream of stars. As soon as she did, she wanted to disappear into the empty, thoughtlessness place she arrived in without any answers. Not again. The red shadow will surely come this time. Suddenly, I saw a new memory. Possibly because I used another to make a trade for something. Blank. I heard a familiar yet new sound. I wish for nothing. I seek nothing. Only to fuse with the consciousness that hurtles backwards in time to zero. The sound. The bitter, sad meaninglessness pulls me by the hair. But I have to resist. The red ghost was always going to be my biggest hurdle. I must not forget the value of life. I must forget the dignity of death. Oh, I must forget, not I must not. The sound persists. It's got nothing to do with this journey. It's just an external distraction. And yet, I think I finally understand. I know what noise has been making me so uneasy. Not her lines, okay. What the... The unsettling whispers were directed at me. Or perhaps the red shadow was perplexed by the quiet soul listening to it. It glares at me, its eyes full of hatred. How could I be so unprepared? Don't tell me. You can't be serious. Going to turn me into your prey for that? That is your everything. You have nothing else. The effect of rewinding. The decision to never say never. Is prime, is meaningless life. She negated it. She used her superior power to negate that sound which was an absolute rule to him. Just brushed it aside like it was a cobweb. The sound disappeared. A new one replaced it. I wish for nothing. I want nothing. A pure, obedient heart. That's why you get nothing. A life of falsehood led by affirmation. This is ridiculous. My legs move towards the future, but they stop. Change of plans. I'm taking a different path. Nothing's changed. It's just something has made me real mad. How can I put it? You call this the past, you idiot? If I don't complain about something to someone, I'll explode. Even if it's just to the voice or to he who hears it. Or to the part of me who just stays quiet and watches. Or to the one who did that to him. With no answers, I open my eyes. Aoko released everything she had dragged up. As for what was there, or what she saw, she could not remember. All she held on to was the fury that burned in her heart. Pushed on by something, she did not know what, she opened the door to magic. The change was extraordinary. Beneath her, the snow vanished, replaced by a small patch of lush green grass. This ground had never existed under the frozen blanket. It had been rewritten into a new landscape. The very elements rejected her, as if the world itself was fighting back. Yeah, don't go messing with the texture of the world. Gaia doesn't like that. The electrical discharge lashed at her body. This miracle threatened to destroy the world. The world had to protect itself. It moved to expunge her. Pain scorched her every cell, trying to tear away her consciousness. But she did not falter. All this pain and this loneliness was to take her to the root. Ever since inheriting true magic, she had suffered this torture time and time again. She contended against the voiceless protest of the cosmos. The burden engulfed her retinas and nerves in flames. And then... light. She finally understood. She remembered why she came back, and what she wanted to scream. A censoring voice told her to stop. At the edges of oblivion, her hand touched the true form of magic. The snarling red shadow was there, telling her it was no use. So much doubt, so much fear. But such things mean nothing to her, to me. I don't care about a magician's obligations to the destruction of mankind. I'm sick and tired of hearing about it. I only have one reason for doing anything right now. God, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. I just want to save him.
No, same.
All is not sane, yet all shall be right. A blue whirlwind whisked up around her. Casting aside her doubt and sorrow, the magician played her trick upon the world. Ooh, pretty. Time flowed backwards. Music quiet for you guys too, or is that just my headset? I think it's just my headset. If not, if it sounds like it's a little quiet, I'll bump it up in post. Childhood memories were overwritten. White flowers appeared as far as the eye could see. Brighter than snow, they rippled like a wave across the world, devouring it. Hey, yo, fucking henshin? Let's go. There it is.
Fly. Timeless. Wow.
You gonna say the second half there? No? 5 timeless words, order has fallen to ruin. What was declared had come to be. In this time and place alone, the 5th magic made itself known. In the blink of an eye, the snowy clearing had transformed. A sea of fully bloomed white flowers blanketed the grounds. Only the dilapidated school building and the bare winter trees signified this was the original world. The once cold winds now blew with a pleasant warmth across the landscape. Even the night sky was once again teeming with stars. When one reached out, one could almost touch them. There was a mix of comfort and solitude, quiet enough to carry the sound of insects flying through the air. A scene far removed from the impurity and grief of humans. The world was nothing, yet one that needed nothing. It was his most precious memory. The winter tundra had changed into a spring meadow. Aoko's so-called true magic confused Toko. Sure, it was pleasing to the eye, but she wanted to see something less idealistic. Aoko's spell was clearly no small feat, but the surrounding mana had not changed. Better to be confused, though, than deal with something like Alice Kuonji's flat snark. The only changes seemed to be the flower field, and Aoko's appearance. She seemed to have received some enhancement to her physical form, but it would never be enough to match Toko.
確かに魔法といえば魔法だが
Toko said with a hint of annoyance.
あいにくとお互い夢見る年頃ではないんだまさかそれで終わりではないだろ
Aoko began walking through the sea of flowers. But she was not headed towards Toko.
いえ、これでおしまいよ。私も、あなたも。
Aoko's words sent a wave of unease through Toko. Her sister's voice seemed different somehow. It was mostly the same in pitch, so it had to be the tone. No, that was the same too. Something was off. Could it be... It was then Toko noticed something else that had changed. Not just Aoko in the clearing. The severed body lying at Aoko's feet. It was now whole. Corpse reanimation? Wound healing? No, fucking time magic. It did not look like Aoko had used a significant formula, and besides, regenerating a body did not bring it back to life. Since the dawn of time, even true magic has never been able to bring back the dead. The body of the boy behind Aoko was moving. It was breathing, like it was taking a nap.
死者の蘇生が青崎の魔法いや違うあれは蘇生というより
Before she could think of an answer, Toko realized what had seemed out of place to her before. Aoko's mannerisms appeared beyond her years. Her appearance had changed ever so slightly, but beyond there had been a change from within. By the time Toko arrived at the seemingly impossible conclusion, Aoko had closed the distance between them.
タービン、セット。
Aoko raised her left hand to eye level. Toko could see, no, hear the magical energy generating inside Aoko. It was sound Toko had never heard before. Aoko only possessed single-function, low-grade circuits no better than any third-rate mage, so she generated magical energy at a much lower rate than Toko. However, this speed was absurdly quick, moving even faster than blood pumping through her body. Magecraft could vibrate. How in the hell were the activated magic circuits audible? Even the Association had never heard of such a thing.
我が目前に勝利ありき
Spurred to action by the sudden dread she felt, Toko hurriedly carved runes into the air. Toko summoned the divine protection of victory, Tyr, to surround herself with a barrier, which was further enhanced by her crest. Paying in no mind, Aoko held her arm steady, not moving it up to strike her target directly.
まだ展開。
Aoko commanded herself succinctly. This was beyond magecraft. In just a few words, she had fired 20 magic bullets. Like a meteor storm, the bullets smashed through the rocket-proof rune barrier, as well as Toko's spell-woven coat.
装填ではなく展開だと
The protective runes lining her coat screamed. They would not be able to take another barrage like that, and she had already taken internal injuries. She loathed to admit it, but Aoko vastly outclassed Toko in terms of raw power. Even harder to admit was that her sister probably had not even brought out the big guns yet.
アンサズサウェルイングズ
Jumping backwards, Toko drew more runic symbols in the air. In response, her crest burned brightly. But,
遅い
with a single word, Aoko nullified the runes, dissolving them before they could be given meaning. The power of Aoko's words had surpassed the magical energy of Toko's rune magecraft. With the runes nullified, Aoko continued advancing through the white flowers. From her calmness to the robust spinning of her magic circuits and her breathing, she was different. A woman with sublime self-control, a trait only found in mages with a lifetime of combat experience.
あれは時間か
Yeah. She gave a little, went into the hyperbolic time chamber and fucking, hit the lab. Given the evidence, that was the only explanation for the Aozaki magic. Ako's magic circuits had not been amplified. That would have been impossible anyway. Like Toko, she would have to externalize them, which would just increase the scope for magical energy and techniques. By nature, the quality of a mage's magic circuits did not change. But Aoko was now clearly a superior mage to Toko. So there's only one logical conclusion. In an instant, she had grown from an amateur to a veteran. She fast-forwarded her own time. The scarred red mage turned her back to her sister and ran. She knew she could not win, so she fled towards the old school building. Aoko did not fire. Not out of pity, but because she deduced that an attack at this range was risky. She went to chase after her sister, but stopped suddenly. A few words caught in her throat. She took a small breath.
アリス、そいつ、お願い。
So, are you going to have an echo in your voice from now on? She said, slightly embarrassed by the maturity of her voice. White petals flitted through the air. Without looking back, she made after Toko, her long hair flowing behind her. And with that, that is where we're going to end it here for today. Mainly because it's almost 7 o'clock, which is when my videos are supposed to go up. So by the time this thing is edited and exported, it's going to be past the normal upload time. So, whoops. Should have started this earlier. But also, there's probably only like 5-10 minutes left in the chapter, knowing my luck whenever I decide to stop these things. But hey, time is not a infinite resource. Well, in the cosmic sense of the universe, maybe. But for us humans, it is most definitely finite. So, you got things to do, I got other things to do. Yeah. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell. See you all next time for the next episode of Hoyo, where Toko is probably going to get her teeth kicked in. Hope to see you guys all then. Later. Bye.